Hello again, year 9. So in the last video, we had a look at this mind map of the different types of urbanization. If you haven't watched it and you are kind of struggling, or if you're halfway through this video and you're struggling with the like remembering the content, I do highly recommend that you go back and have a look at this video. This map on its own won't make sense unless you watch it. So I'm going to go straight into this one. This is the question, which I'm going to spend a decent amount of time, like in the last video, I said decent amount of time on the content. In this one, we're going to have some spare time left over to do the questions. So I'm going to bug it straight away, just like you should be doing. Compare. Compare is our command word. So we are using your comparative words like likewise, which is if something is similar, whereas if something is different. And then there's loads of other ones that we could use, like on the other hand, however, differently. So causes I went through in the content video, and consequences as well. And I went through each urban trend and what they mean. The three trends are here. I'm actually going to be using this as kind of a skeleton structure of what you would have your paragraphs about. So exam structure is going to be up here. Okay. I'm going to go straight into it after we finish bugging. ACs, very, very important that we know what they are, advanced countries, and then EDCs and LIDCs. Again, if you don't know what the difference is between the two of them, and especially in relation to urban areas and urban trends, you really do need to go and watch that content video. Now, straight into it, right? So the exam structure, we need an introduction. That's going to be your first paragraph, okay? It's kind of going to be off on its own with its own structure. There is no real structure to an introduction apart from answering the question and saying what you're going to talk about. It gives you the structure of your answer, so I really recommend it. Then we're going to talk about each of these three, your advanced country trends. They're going to make up your paragraphs. And rather than having an EDC and LIDC paragraph, I'm going to suggest, I think, a nicer way to answer this question. And remember that you need to link EDCs and LIDCs into this, and of course into your suburbanization paragraph. Okay, so it will all make sense once I've done an example, a kind of structure of each. All right, it's not going to be Peel. We're going to have a point. We're going to have a cause, a consequence, and a link to EDCs and LIDCs in each. Okay, so that's going to be the structure of each of my main paragraph. I'm going to have three of those. One, I'll take them off when we've kind of gone through each. 2, 3. Okay, so introduction and 3 more paragraphs. I'll go straight to the introduction because it's going to set the tone of what we're going to be talking about. In this, you're going to define urbanization, building up of areas, building up of man-made structures in an area, removal of rural landscape. So define urbanization. And then you're going to say urbanization is different or has been different, okay, in ACs compared to EDCs and LIDCs. And you're going to have a brief reason here. That reason is going to be explored in the link sentences that I mentioned over here. And that reason is what I mentioned in the content video, is that ACs went through industrial revolution early. Okay. Sorry, this getting in the way. And EDCs and LIDCs did not. And the reason for that was because they had slowed development okay, as a result of colonization, due to colonization. And that takes us nicely, really nicely, in fact, because we've already built up an idea in the examiner's mind that we know what we're talking about. We've got our introduction done, and we're now going to go into the first peel paragraph, and that's going to be the point. In the 1950s, suburbanization happened. You're going to define suburbanization, so you're going to give a definition of that. Okay. You're going to say that it happened in advanced countries, not in EDCs and LIDCs, please. Okay. You're going to give the cause of this trend. What caused suburbanization? The cause was overpopulation. You're going to talk a bit about pollution if you want. Okay. In the city center. Consequence of suburbanization down here. You're going to talk about the urban sprawl, creation of the suburbs, which is the spreading of the suburbs. Sprawl means to spread. That new rural area being converted into an urban landscape with some aspects of a rural area still, like parks and stuff like that. Urban sprawl and depopulation of the city centre, which is a really important one because we're actually going to come and talk about that in our next paragraph. How can we link this to EDCs and LIDCs? Again, we said that it's all about talking about the slowing of development in these places, but actually the movement from rural areas to cities ends up having some kind of flip similarity. I'm trying to think of how I want to express that, but the outside of the city center in an EDC or LIDC is actually going to get bigger and bigger because of the development of those slums. So you could say, likewise, in EDCs and LIDCs, there's this similar trend of slums develop in and around the main city center. But you're going to have that little kind of difference as well. Although, another comparative for us, really good. Although there was much more poor quality of life than in the suburbs. So poor quality of life or comfort, you could refer to anything in the suburbs than the suburbs. Apologies. Okay, so that's a comparative between what's happening in your EDCs and LIDCs and your ACs. Okay, and we're going to do that again in the counter-urbanization paragraph. So P for point, CA for cause, CO for consequence, link to EDCs and LIDCs. It's going to be paragraph 2. We're going to talk about counter-urbanization in the 1960s and the 1970s. So counter-urbanization, the movement away from cities to rural areas, not just suburbs, but out even further to rural areas. And you define it in that way, and then you give the cause. The cause is actually depopulation of the city centre. There's not as much of a wish to live there anymore. So you're going to explain that. And then you're going to give a consequence of this movement to rural areas, people going to rural areas to look for more comfort, less crime, place to raise their kids in those green spaces. You can talk about the urban decline. Okay, you can refer to urban decline in the city centre, abandoned buildings, things like that, crime rate going up because there's not as many people to police, so maybe the policing lowers down a bit. And then you're going to link this to a problem. So for example, what kind of problem, or you're going to link this to the advanced countries to emerging and developing and low income and developing countries. How is it different? So whereas the movement of people in those countries, emerging and low income countries, is the opposite. People are moving to the city. And also there's that development gap, and that's the reason why they're moving. Okay, so it's all about how you phrase that. And I'm going to finish this up. I'm going to ask you to figure out how you would answer the last part, which would be your re-urbanization. And again, try and make a comparison between emerging and developing and low-income developing countries, because if you don't do this, you are not accessing your level 3 marks. So you access them by doing that. Okay, good luck, year 9, and please send your work on to me.